Hey, this is Luke Tull, and I have developed probably anywhere from 200 to 300 different projects on Shopify over the past 8 years in the e-commerce space. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down my most complicated Shopify projects. I think there is a lot of confusion, there's a lot of noise, and you would be amazed. I come across business owners every single day where they say, oh, this is super easy, right? And I even came across a scenario where we have a project now which is super duper complicated, but apparently a developer told them it's super easy, which very interesting enough. I'm not exactly sure why they were saying that. But anyway, I digress. I am just going to run through the list and I'm going to be ranking them from S to F or 5 to 1. Basically saying S is like super high difficulty, F is like super low difficulty, and that is what we're going to be doing today. Okay, starting out, if you're doing some Shopify theme tweaks or installing third-party applications, that is what we consider in the F tier. Now, I don't want to say that takes no effort whatsoever, but basically, installing a third-party app is literally coming out here on the Shopify App Store and finding out what you need. Now, I will say, if you know exactly what you need, it's super easy to install. You know, I just come out here, I'm like, I need a fulfillment app. I look on here, a lot of time, something that seems super simple. Cool, I need to just install an app. How hard can that be? First off, you have to decide which app you're actually going to install and whether or not it's actually going to fit your needs. So a lot of that requires coming out here, clicking some buttons and reading about the app and things of that nature. Again, when I say F tier, it's like, well, that comes with some nuances even, right? Like if I need a discount app, you know, that might mean that I need to come out here and figure out, well, which discount app do I actually install? I have no clue, basically, right? There's so many of them. What can they do? What do I need to do? And you got to pair and mix and match those requirements with the actual app you're going to install. A lot of time, our strategy with these things is to install one of the top apps, click around and say, yeah, this is going to work, or no, it's not going to work. That is basically step 17 in that process. But yeah, you get the idea. I'm going to consider that F tier. That's actually like lowest level complexity. But as you can see, even just installing an application is not as super as like A, B, C. Yeah, I could talk to ChatGPT and I could say, yeah, okay, like tell me exactly what app to install. But even then, it's quite unreliable. Okay, next, we have the multiple images for a single product variant. So within Shopify, typically speaking, you're going to have one variant associated with the product. I'm looking for a specific website. Just give me 1 second. So you're typically going to have one image per color per variation of said thing, right? So in this case, here's a primary image. It's this one here, right? So when I click add to cart, you can actually see it is a single image, right? So this is why there's only, typically speaking, a single image associated with this color agate and size panel of 12 inch by 36 inch. But a lot of the time, you know, we need to show multiple different images for each and every single variation, right? So in that case, we actually have to do some manipulation on the back end that allows us to add these other things that actually show alongside our single picture. And on top of that, if you do not modify this, Shopify will just show all these other colors. I'm trying to think of a good example, but basically, if we did not modify the theme, it would actually show all these other colors, and then it would not be matching exactly what the user has picked. So in that case, I would consider it more A tier, right? Like we do have to do a little bit of back-end manipulation. We have to do a little bit of scripting. We have to modify the images, kind of coordinate on the naming convention. It can be more complicated, right? Example in this situation, for instance, black and agate is different than just starting with the word agate, right? So it can be a little bit complicated, but I'm going to put it A tier. It's not quite S. It's not quite crazy, but it's kind of getting there, right? Because there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen. Let's see. What do we have next? Yeah, Real Beast is a custom Shopify marketplace. So yeah, we actually did this recently. Let's see if I can find this. I think this is right. So basically, this is a website that we worked on and actually built out a marketplace for them. So this basically allows other people to log into their account and actually post products that they own and they want that they want to sell to people, and actually allowing them to actually post physical products and have them be sold and then shipped from the right location. There are some apps that I think do this as well, but I would consider this kind of like more on the higher end. Like this takes a lot more coordination, effort, and thought process. Like hey, what if someone needs to change the price? What if they need to change the quantity? What if the product I want to list is not listed? What if there are more than one vendor listing the same product? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with shipping? So there's all these different questions and scenarios that you must think through when you're actually building this out. Now, this site is we didn't focus on design specifically on this website. It was more about functionality, but allowing all that to occur, and then we kind of run into, okay, then how do vendors know what they need to ship and things of that nature? So it's definitely like a more complicated example. You can't just talk to any old developer. They'll just figure this out and like whip it up for you, right? So this is definitely what I consider like more S tier, meaning you really have to know the ins and outs of Shopify. You need to know how everything works together. You need to understand the products, the pricing. You need to understand how collections work and how the Shopify APIs on the back end work. There's all this knowledge that you have to basically pull from, and you can't just hire someone to say like, hey, just build me this marketplace and just be done with it, right? A lot of time we've actually seen this occur, and ultimately what ends up happening is the customer doesn't really get what they want, or the system becomes very convoluted or complicated, or it's very bulky and clunky because someone didn't fully understand all the different things that go into building something like this on Shopify. Okay, next, a fully custom theme design and build. I was kind of debating whether I put this in S or A. We do a lot of this, and maybe because we do a lot of it, it's a lot easier for us to execute than other agencies or other developers. We definitely have a process. We definitely have a way of going about this that makes it easy, but I will say you definitely need to have pretty good chops. Yeah, you can hire any developer and they'll just do it, but we're like looking at, okay, making sure that when we do build this out, that everything is functioning properly, the Shopify filters work still, navigation and modifications that the users put in on the back end of Shopify actually show up on the front end. We're able to swap out images and text and things of that nature. But ultimately, doing a full design and build is actually not a joke. It's definitely higher end sort of development, and I would not just hire anybody and everybody to do that, because again, there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to custom theme development. You can't just spin it up and say, here you go, right? Again, it's one of those things, you could put in ChatGPT and it could spit out like maybe the website, but ultimately we need to take into consideration all those different Shopify nuances and how the back end coordinates with the front end and how all that works together when really we don't have a theme developer doing it for us. So I'd consider that more A tier. Building a Shopify store from scratch, just using a premium theme. So I had that pulled up earlier. We just look at themes.shopify.com. So these are a little bit easier. Yeah, though, like you do have to know what you're doing as far as like how do I structure things on the page correctly, but ultimately these cost you anywhere from $300 to $400. And basically what you're doing here is you're basically on Shopify, you click on the left hand side, you kind of drag and drop things on the editor. I don't want to go into the details there necessarily, but basically what you're able to do there is basically it's a bit of a drag and drop situation. But again, as you can see, let's just say they had like really bad imagery, this would not look as nice, right? If they didn't actually coordinate the structure of the website properly, this would not look as good. If we had, a widescreen image and then another widescreen image as an example, then, well, that doesn't look good either, right? So, a lot of time the theme developers give me a lot what you need, but ultimately, still, what I consider very important is actually being able to communicate the message of the product and actually present that in a proper way, even if it is in a theme like this one. So, I do consider that like B or C tier, potentially, but ultimately, the reason it's not just like all the way in the bottom tier, like an F tier or something like that, is because, well, you still need to know what you're doing. You still need to know how to structure things. You still need to understand user experience and intuitive design and how things make sense and how things work together, right? All this stuff, I feel like there is a range, right? This is not super ABC. Everything is quite nuanced when it comes to building out something for a business or for a brand, because ultimately that business or brand and its avatar have like a certain profile and have a certain way people like to see information. And ultimately it's working with the client to understand what that is so that we can actually put it into the website. So even on something like this, someone would say, hey, that's really quick and easy, right? Like that shouldn't take you a whole lot of time. It's like, yeah, technically not, dragging and dropping and kind of like putting things in, but we need to work with you on the assets. We need to work with you on, hey, you're missing this imagery and we need this photo, right? So ultimately that is still, I would consider B tier, but again, these things can kind of vary based on the business that you're building it for. Yeah, it gets quite spicy here. This is quite funny. So building a custom UI on top of third-party app or building a custom UI in general is actually quite tricky. Pull up this example here. It can be quite an interesting endeavor, I will say myself. So basically basically Shopify out of the box does not look like this. What we did here is we actually built out the color schemes, and as people are clicking through, you can kind of see on my screen here, it's changing this variant ID, which is meaning just changing the color that would be added to cart if I had happened to click it. So anyway, a lot of the time when we're building out custom functionality or custom user experience, or in this case, I want to show colors versus a word. I don't know what color this is. Zablau. I hope I'm saying that right. Oh, this is Dutch. It's probably wrong, but this is like a light blue, right? And then we have a dark blue. But basically, instead of just saying the words or being a regular drop down, we want to use this swatch concept, right? Showing the actual fabric on the screen to the user. Make it a lot easier. It's just visual, right? Oh, okay, I like that blue. Let me just click on that, right? Versus having to read it, look over here and figure out, do I like it? They can kind of visually see an example of what that fabric would look like without even having to click on it. That's the idea. A lot of it does require some custom functionality. Basically, the whole point is that we need to be able to reference an image of some sort. And when that image is clicked, well, this is custom built in, right? Because none of this existed with the theme. We actually had to build this on top of it and then kind of coordinate those different changes to the actual variant changing accordingly, right? So that is what we consider like a custom UI. Yeah, this is more A tier for sure. I mean, you do have to understand how things are working together from a user experience standpoint. What happens when I click here, and then how does that work? Is it going to be problematic for the customer? We actually had to work quite a bit with this brand to kind of figure out all of this, adjust things. They had to put some GIFs in to show them, hey, you got to measure this, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Okay, so a relatively easy thing or straightforward thing, and that I consider F tier, is basically adding a Metafield in Shopify. So a Metafield in Shopify is basically a custom field. You know, if I want to say some custom information about this, which I don't think we have any of this on here necessarily, but if I want to display some custom information specifically about a product, there's something called a Metafield, and it's basically just custom information about a product. Let's just say they want to know like the thickness of this material. Well, that could change based on which material I'm looking at, which product I'm looking at, right? So we would create something called thickness. We go to the code and we say, all right, yeah, this is we basically type 4 words with dots in the middle. And that's pretty much it. Again, it's F tier in the sense that, yeah, it's super easy to configure and set up. However, where do I put it on the page? How do I show the information? That is where you kind of start to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. So it kind of depends on the level of expertise and the person that you're working with. Do they know e-commerce? Do they understand user experience? Sort of these things, right? But I would consider this straight up adding that is an F tier. Let's see, variant level displays on collection pages. So I think what we mean by this one, this is another example of this. Something that we faced is that when you're trying to show products, right? Oh, this is a bad example. Let's go flooring. Yep, waterproof cork. Basically, all these are like similar products, right? All these are different types of variations of the same product. I think this is another bad example. Let me just see if I can find cork, traditional cork. These all look quite similar. Give me 1 second. So like this one specifically, right? This is all click, cinch, lock, seal flooring. So basically when you're trying to show what we consider variant based options on here, this is basically what we're talking about, which is like this actually is all one product. So Shopify likes to present information for a single product. It does not like to present information of all the different individual colors of a product. Not to mention, if you think about this product and how it's structured, it's not only the color that's a variation, it's the color plus the size combination. I know I'm clicking around a lot. Hopefully this is helpful. But if you think about it, well, we just want to show the color one time, right? So custom code has to be developed to say, well, if I showed a gate, I don't want to show a gate again. We already showed it, right? So some code had to be built in order to actually make that happen. So that's what we call like a variant level display. Again, Shopify likes to show single products. If it was up to Shopify, it would just show one grid item here and just say marmalium click cinch lock seal as an example. What else we got? Okay, geolocation. So geolocation, when it comes to country specific information, Shopify is really good at, right? It does that very well. You can build different themes based on your geolocation. You can have one for United States, one for Canada, one for France, etc. Right? But what we have come up against and been facing, and I would consider this S tier for sure. And the variant level display, by the way, the last one, S tier as well. Very complicated. Kind of having to play by Shopify's rules a little bit. That is very easy when it comes to countries, right? When it comes to countries, super easy, super straightforward, no problem at all. When it comes to like the region, for instance, hey, I live in the United States. I want to sell this product to Texas at this specific price, but I don't want it to show it to anybody else, or I want to sell it to somewhere else at a specific price. That is not a feature at all in Shopify. It's just not a thing. Doesn't happen. Everything on the back end of Shopify is one price, regardless of the location. When it comes to regional things, right? Like when it comes to the United States and those specific states within it, Texas, Indiana, Ohio, etc. So that's something that I would consider S tier as well, because there's a lot of thought process that needs to go into that. Yeah, you got to consider Google and how does that work, and making sure you're kind of playing by their rules, because Google don't like when you are showing a different price than what you're kind of saying that the price is, right? So you got to think through those things and like code it in such a way where you don't get flagged. Anyway, something I would consider, I was going to say A tier, but I actually think the next one we're going to look at is a Shopify private application. This is basically an application you're building specific to a store. So this is like a custom functionality that the store needs. They want to be able to have a user interface and kind of click around. Basically, this I would consider S tier still, because there's a lot to do. There's a lot of infrastructure. You got to set up the application on some other server outside of Shopify. You got to talk to that server. You got to talk back and forth. There's chatter back and forth. There's functionality on the outside of Shopify, that there's functionality on the inside of Shopify that you have to work with. So it is actually quite complicated. I would consider that S tier. Something like this would be, show you this example. Something like this would be when we're doing some customization of this, right? Where we're doing sign online. So basically this just allows the person to type in their name. So like, for example, this is Dex Tech. It's 180 main, whatever, right? So something like this, you can actually type all this in. We're capturing all this information. The big thing on this project was basically uploading a logo or like whatever you want to show on the letter. And we got to save this area, right? We have to save the information that's being displayed here. So that all being said, I would consider that S tier. Another thing that's similar, but I would say on another level, would be a public Shopify applications. Those are even more complicated because those have to be built with other stores in mind. You kind of have to play in this space of what if another store installs it? What if their structure is different, right? You kind of have to basically make sure that you're developing the application in a global way. So like this one is like a little bit easier, right? It's still S, but I would say lower S or maybe even A. But when it comes to public, that's like the very top. That's like one of the most complicated things you can do. You also need to get approved by Shopify. They ding you on documentation or functionality or security. You gotta play by the rules. It's a whole situation. Let's see what else we got on the list. We got template tweaks. Template tweaks are definitely like B or C tier. Those aren't too bad. It's just considering the user interface, right? It's like making sure that we're placing things in the user interface that people can click on and leverage, right? So those are not too bad. What else we got? Data migrations within Shopify are pretty hairy, just in general. They're definitely S tier. You have to know what you're doing. You have to understand what the data and where it's coming from, and then how do I structure that in Shopify to properly sell that on the website, right? So there's a lot of like different thought process. How do I structure this data in such a way that's not a mess on Shopify, and I can actually potentially even talk back to the system where it came from? Very tricky thing to do. Let's see. This comes to mind. I think it's Stride Tutoring. They're using Shopify as well, at least as far as I know, they still are. So like basically organizing all this different information, the videos, the people, their skill sets, all of this, right? Their biography, their teaching specialization, all the courses they teach, blah, blah, blah. So all those different things we have to consider. Their availability was a whole other, situation as well. So like all these different things you have to consider when migrating data from like another platform, and it can be very, very tricky in nature. Let's put it that way. Let's see here. Simple JavaScripts, those are relatively like lower on the complexity. Again, I wouldn't put them in C, D, or F or anything like that. I'd probably put them in B. They're still somewhat technical. You still got to know what you're doing, and it's still somewhat complex. So simple ones I would consider B, and then complex, where I have to like understand all these different moving components and how they all work together, I consider that more A tier. Example would be like if I click this, right, then like, okay, I just need to change the times that are showing up, right? As an example, it's like, okay, that's a relatively easy script, 60 versus 30 minutes. Instead of showing 60-minute duration, okay, just show the other 30. Just split it up by 30 minutes instead. I would consider that somewhat simple. A more complicated example I'm trying to think of, what would that be? I think some of these would be like, hey, I need to make sure this information is displayed when these things are clicked. So for example, the example we gave as far as like showing images specific to that variation and then kind of updating that as it comes along, that's definitely more coordinated effort. I need to understand where the images are. I got to grab them. I got to potentially put them in a thumbnail pattern and like a carousel, that kind of thing, right? So I would consider that more complex as an example. Okay, anything personalized, anything custom is super, super duper S tier. Like that's almost like public app level, because again, it's understanding how do I set this up on the back end and the front end, how all these things play together. How do I get the information from what the customer ordered to make sure that's on the back end for the actual owner or team on the back end to actually be able to process those orders efficiently. It's definitely more S tier, especially if you're not using an application. If you're using an app, that's great, but typically it's like a little bit clunkier and things of that nature. So I would say the last thing is like anything to do with like custom pricing logic that isn't just like super ABC, and Shopify can be somewhat complicated. I would consider that B or A tier. That could be like wholesale wholesale like discounts, volume discounts, free products, things of that nature. That's definitely like more A tier, right? For doing a giveaway or something like this. If you're doing a giveaway for a product, you have to make sure that people can't just buy it for free. You got to make sure they can't just add quantity to the cart. Like there's a bunch of different things you have to think through as far as like a free product giveaway. Shopify has discount codes that can help you, but there's been scenarios where we haven't been able to use them. Then we got to do this like dilly-dally thing. But anyway, that's just a small list. That's just the list I came up with today off the top of my head. So I hope that has been helpful to you all. I appreciate you. I hope this has been a helpful journey, helpful video, and like, subscribe, comment, and I will talk to you later. Bye bye now.